You know, Barberena found his chin late in that fight, and I just feel that Laprise is a guy who can, you know, he can be hit, he can be hurt, and Buffando being as unpredictable and as unorthodox as he is, I think he'll be able to find his moment either in a clinch tie-up or, you know, with strikes or even on the ground, but I'm taking Buffando for the upset here. Definitely not looking to bet on this one. It's too crazy a prediction, and Laprise, as I said, I think definitely deserves to be the favorite heading into it and is the logical pick. But I think Buffando has that that X factor, and yeah, I'm going to take him here. All right, at middleweight, I guess we have another fight that just changed. Vitor Miranda and Julian Marquez. I was going to take Marquez, not all that confidently, but yeah, that was going to be my pick. Again, this one's TBA, so we're going to move on. Light heavyweight, Jan Blachowicz versus Jared Cannonier. I'm really sad that Jared Cannonier isn't fighting Little Nog anymore, because you know, that was going to be a sure money bet if there ever was one. And this one, I feel that Cannonier should still win, but it just doesn't have that same juice. Doesn't have that same juice. Doesn't have that same fire under it that you know, Cannonier versus Little Nog did in terms of you know, getting me up for betting. But yeah, Cannonier, solid wrestler, and that's something Blachowicz has struggled with throughout his UFC career. Against Corey Anderson, really struggled in the clinch against Jimmy Manua. And on the feet, Cannonier, I think, is more dangerous. A really powerful striker. And Blachowicz, while he appears very dangerous and, you know, had that very nice body kick finish over Ilir Latifi in his UFC debut, since then hasn't gotten a finish until his last fight against Devin Clark, and that came by a really weird kind of standing rear naked neck crank. So I think that yeah, Cannonier can hit takedowns and land the harder shots on the feet. I mean, Blachowicz got into a really ugly brawl with Igor Pokrajec that he just kind of barely edged out. Also, the Cummins fight, another example of where he really struggled with a wrestler. But I think Blachowicz kind of turned a corner in that Devin Clark fight. I mean, he fought a much more inexperienced fighter with a much less complete game. But I don't know, seeing him kind of put things together, really pick his strikes better, and you know, go for that submission on the feet, gives me a little pause here, because Cannonier, you know, while he's you know, kind of an athletic specimen, you know, for a light heavyweight, and a pretty effective wrestler and power puncher, you know, still really struggled with the takedowns against Glover Teixeira, and you know, against Jan Cutelaba, his chin really held up in that fight, and what allowed him to win that fight and withstand all the punishment from Cutelaba. But you know, if he's taking chances like that against Blachowicz, who's probably the more schooled technical striker, I think it's possible that you know, he eats something, he gets hurt by Blachowicz. But I'm going to take Cannonier, just not one that I really want to bet on, even if I think it's a fairly, you know, logical pick. All right, on to the main card. Featherweight Ricardo Lamas versus Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett is filling in late notice here for Aldo. I have to go with Ricardo Lamas, right? Josh Emmett, I thought he looked really improved, dropping down to featherweight in his last fight against who's the guy he fought? Felipe Aranches. Was just able to push a much higher pace from the get-go. Really seemed to carry power with him down from 155 and was just hammering Aranches all fight. Dropped him. I think set a record for knockdowns in the fight, but in that first round, dropped him several times. That's a really entertaining, kind of easy performance to see and really get behind. And Lamas, what I'm waiting for is one day where he just starts to look old and his chin starts to go. And he's been knocked out before against big power punchers like Chad Mendez. But the guy, even in this kind of late stage, he's still very clearly making technical improvements to all facets of his game. Both the ground, getting a sub over Oliveira, and on the feet. I think the Diego Sanchez fight, that's a fight of his I point to where I think his technique looked really sharp and clean, and then his power is still there, knocking out Jason Knight. So I don't think Emmett, I think he can come out really hard and maybe give Lamas a scare or two at the start of the fight, but I think he's not going to be able to maintain that kind of success. I mean, he couldn't even put Aranches away, and he did give Aranches a slight window to get back in that fight. Aranches was able to start landing some shots on the feet, and Lamas is just far more technical, has a lot more power than a guy like Aranches, and a really good wrestler himself. I think would probably win the wrestling battle against Emmett. So I think Emmett's just kind of outclassed here a little bit too much in all areas. It's a fun, action fight, but I don't see him actually being able to get the win. So I'm going to take Lamas. I'm going to take Lamas by decision, I think. All right, light heavyweight, Glover Teixeira versus Misha Cirkunov. Love this matchup. And probably more excited for this matchup than anyone on the card. A very, very high stakes fight for both guys, and really kind of a head scratcher. Cirkunov, man, other than that Ozdemir knockout loss, he's just been really impressive. I thought his striking was coming a long way. The Nikita Krylov fight was really able to, bait Krylov in and wait for his opportunities to throw and land, and really makes his shots count and makes a lot out of very few strikes, and did that same kind of thing in his debut. Was his debut against Jan Kutalabin? I think that wasn't his debut, but this very patient waiting at range and letting guys take their offense to him, and then he counters them with a sharp, long punch, and he's got power in that style, and he's put guys down doing that. And I think that he can do that against Teixeira, who I think is just fading at this point. I think he's getting to be too old to compete at the elite level anymore, and really struggled with the reach and the range of Alexander Gustafsson in his last fight. Cirkunov, we're talking about a totally different totally different, you know, level of pace and volume, but I think a similarity in the reach and the range and kind of the patience waiting to find openings. And Teixeira, you know, doesn't take damage too well. I think that Cirkunov can, I think he can pick apart Teixeira on the feet. And then on the ground, you know, Teixeira is still, even at light heavyweight, probably one of the best guys who can just out-wrestle guys and just outwork them on the ground. Really good top control and just wearing guys out, grinding them down on the ground. So I don't expect Cirkunov to, you know, engage him in a straight-out wrestling battle, but I think that if he starts to have success on the feet, he opens up Teixeira or hurts him, he might jump on a guillotine or you know, transition to a takedown after kind of piecing him up a little bit. So I'm taking Cirkunov for the upset. You know, I don't know. I just feel like Teixeira, he does have big knockout power, but I think he's just a little bit too flat-footed and has a little bit too basic of a boxing style to really make it work against a long technical fighter like Cirkunov. And then even though he's a strong wrestler, I don't think he really wants to tangle on the ground with someone as dangerous as Cirkunov, who you know, is a very slick grappler himself. So I just think Teixeira, it's kind of a, you know, he has the experience advantage, but it's just kind of a bad style matchup here. I'm taking Cirkunov. I'm taking him by submission. All right, at welterweight, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Mike Perry. I'm taking Ponzinibbio here. You know, you can say that Ponzinibbio, he eats shots. He can, you know, be roughed up a little bit, get rocked. Gunnar Nelson, guys, you know, come out of the gate and they push the pace on him and they're able to kind of beat him to the punch sometimes, like Gunnar Nelson. Even Court McGee in their fight, he was tagging him and kind of you know, making things interesting early in their fight. But Ponzinibbio either comes back from that, you know, except for the Lorenz Larkin fight, but he's able to make adjustments like he did against Nelson and McGee, and then just come right back and knock out those guys. Or he just fights a really tactical, really skilled performance like he did against Zach Cummins and even Nordine Taleb, where he works his jab and uses a lot of footwork and angles and movement. And I just feel like he's way too skilled, has way too varied a striking arsenal for a guy like Perry, who, you know, has a lot of big natural knockout power. But I mean, the guy got outclassed by Alan Jouban, and it wasn't all that long ago. And, you know, he knocks out this guy making his debut on short notice who no one has ever heard of. And even in that fight, you know, ate some shots before getting the knockout in that fight, and, you know, just crush him right out of the gate. And then, you know, people think he's on the level of Darren Till and all these guys. It's kind of bizarre to me. I mean, I recognize the power and, you know, because, you know, the risk of Ponzinibbio getting knocked out, I mean, it's certainly possible. But I just think Ponzinibbio, he's been through the ringer here against a lot of guys at the UFC level, solid guys, and, you know, he's impressed every time, and coming off of a win over Gunnar Nelson, and I can't even remember the name of the guy Mike Perry just beat. So I have to take Ponzinibbio. I think he just uses that jab and kind of puts a boxing clinic on Perry. possibly stopping him. But yeah, I like Ponzinibbio by decision. I would not, bet the house on him, but I think it's one worth placing a bet on. All right, and then the main event, Robbie Lawler versus RDA. This is another super compelling matchup. Part of me feels like RDA, even though he's only a couple years younger than Lawler, but in fight years, I think he's a lot younger. And part of me feels, I was saying that part of me feels like RDA is just too technical and has a lot less miles on his body, so much so that he can just come out and push a pace on Lawler, work a jab, land those heavy leg kicks, hit takedowns, and just, make Lawler look old and slow right out of the gate. And just with his technique and his power that, he can just kind of mow over Lawler, mow him down right out of the gate, just either with a takedown or, hurting him with those leg kicks and just backing him up with those really crisp boxing combinations, just show that he really has the youth and athletic advantage in this fight. But I'm still not convinced that RDA is a true welterweight. I mean, in his fight against what was the guy's name? Tarek Saffiedine. He didn't hit takedowns in that fight. Maybe a couple very brief takedowns, but Saffiedine, got right back up. Or most of them were just failed takedown attempts, or he was in on the legs, but not able to complete a takedown, and looked like Saffiedine was able to have a lot of success competing with RDA physically in the clinch, defending takedowns and really making him work for those takedowns and failing most of the time. And Saffiedine is, no great athlete, not even a guy who's had a lot of success in the division. And that was a really tough physical matchup for RDA in terms of actually getting the takedown. I mean, I guess he controlled the fight because he was the one attempting the takedowns, but his takedowns didn't come easy. And then against Neil Magny, a very impressive performance, but he kicked the leg out with a leg kick. That's what put Magny on the ground. It wasn't a takedown. And I just feel against a guy like Lawler, who's going to be able to really threaten him on the feet and really have an answer for him as he tries to close the distance, that he's not going to get those opportunities for takedowns very easily. And then it becomes a striking match. And at that point, while RDA, I think, is maybe more technical in the sense that he can work, boxing combinations, and he can work a jab and back Lawler up. The flip side of that, I feel like he's limited with that style, and Lawler is a lot more, I can't say Lawler's patient, right? But I think Lawler has a more deep boxing game and striking game that will serve him better over 5 rounds. Kind of like in the McDonald fight where he, really sat down on a jab cross and just went to that over and over again. And I think he can really meet RDA as RDA tries to close the distance. Lawler can really sit down on those maybe more basic combinations than RDA, but tools and combinations that he can go to throughout the fight, whereas RDA has those combinations to close the distance, but after that, if he's not able to do what he did against Pettis or Nate Diaz, I don't know really. I don't really know if he has a whole lot of answers. If the fight goes 5 rounds against Tony Ferguson, he was tough and he was hanging in there, but Ferguson had the jab. He was really keeping RDA at range, keeping him from tying up with him, and I think Lawler can do something similar. And being the bigger guy, Lawler, I think he can push a harder pace, have the better cardio after 5 rounds. And, we saw even in the Alvarez fight, right? RDA, he comes out, looks like a lot more technical, fluid striker, but, once it kind of became a pocket brawl, he got clipped, and he got clipped. His chin didn't hold up, and he didn't have really a whole lot of answers for Alvarez striking in that fight, other than just trying to out-brawl him. And I think that that's kind of what's going to happen here against Lawler. Is he's not going to be able to get those takedowns. He's not going to be able to just push the pace and back him up and blitz him and get in on his legs, and it's going to be more of an even striking battle. And Lawler, I think, has the power, pushes a tremendous pace, and over a couple of rounds, I think he's going to start to overwhelm RDA and just have that deeper boxing game. More of a bread and butter, jab cross and those kinds of more basic, but deeper in the sense that it's more effective and something that will land and really work for him better than RDA striking. So yeah, I'm gonna take Lawler. I think he drags this out into the later rounds, rounds 4 and 5, and I think RDA starts to wilt, or I think his chin goes before then. So I'm taking Lawler by TKO. I know it's kind of this definitely a coin flip fight for me, just because Lawler, it was a nice performance against Cerrone, but he's taken so much damage between the Woodley and the McDonald fights and the Condit fight that this RDA might just be too fresh and too technical early for him. But I think that RDA really relies on those early first round finishes where he can come out and physically overwhelm guys and overwhelm them with speed. But Lawler's going to be a lot tougher than Magny, and if Saffiedine could really defend the takedowns, I think Lawler, he will be able to as well, and then it becomes about pace and endurance and who can throw the harder shots and be there. It was a more effective offense in the later rounds, and I'm going with Lawler there. So Lawler by late TKO, but that's not one I'm looking to bet on. All right, guys, those are my predictions. Sorry about the couple of last-minute changes there. I'll try to get a pick in the description at least for those. But yeah, those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 26. I got one more event to close out the year, UFC 219 currently. After UFC 218, I am almost, I think I was like 404 or something on UFC Fantasy. So trying to seal that top 500 spot for the 4th year in a row. That's my goal. And, the betting I think we've moved in the right direction over the last several events, but we still got some work to do there. But thank you guys for watching and the year, and hopefully we'll finish in the top 500 again and have made some profit since I started betting 6 months ago to close out the year. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Again, Twitter link is in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.